students. So today we are talking about the second portion of the reading assignment, pages 82 to 186, 176 of Isabel Allende's In the Midst of Winter. So definitely, as you're seeing the book progress, you're seeing again the movement forward of essentially two storylines. So there's the past and then there's the present. In the present, we see, we'll talk about the present in a moment, but we see that kind of current storyline that's set in the winter, moving forward as we're learning more and more, and they're kind of essentially going on a journey. In the past, we see more revelations about the events that led each of these three characters to that night in the apartment that kind of ties them all together. So we see for Lucia, we see her path after fleeing Chile. We see her mother Lena's search for Enrique. We see that, the story, the revelation about the wrong body that is, delivered, that after all of kind of Lena's agitation, she is given a body, but it's not her own son. So we see that element of, that confusion. Is her son dead? And they just handed the body. Who is the body that they give her? Is her son alive? And they've just given her a different body. So we see how she is tormented by the not knowing about the fate of Enrique. And we also see about Lucia's marriage to Carlos and kind of how that formed her, and those elements that we see of, the marriage, what it was based on, how it developed, and essentially what it cost Lucia in terms of her own self-respect and how she viewed herself, and really how she is at the point that we see her, there is almost a reflowering happening of her confidence and how she is able to view herself. So that's what we're seeing of Lucia. These are the elements that brought her forward. And we also see that these are the elements that shaped her over the course of her life to the point where she is the person she was when Evelyn arrived. That this is a person who suffered through the loss of her brother, through the not knowing about the fate of her brother. She saw firsthand what it did to their mother to never know what had happened to Enrique. We also see that Lucia was someone who demanded truth. She wrote books about the disappeared in Chile, of what the revolution did to people and to people's lives. So we see how that knowledge of what was done also, that willingness to look at something that was horrible and cruel, that also shaped who Lucia was when Evelyn has arrived. We also see more about Richard. We see his life in Brazil. We have learned about Anita and Bibi, his daughter. And so we're moving forward in what we're learning. In a lot of ways, Richard is the slowest character to be unfolded for us, but you're also seeing what events brought Richard to the point that we saw him at the beginning of this book, and what shaped him to the point that he is willing to risk so much to help Evelyn. And then also we continue to see what is happening for Evelyn. So we see her path to the US border, the so-called luxury route. We see how risky it was, how dangerous it was. And also that emphasis on why she had to flee. Is Evelyn just deciding, hey, I'm just going to go break US laws and go in? No. For Evelyn, this is very much that idea of this is life or death. She cannot stay where she is. She has to, in order to preserve her own life, she has to leave her grandmother, leave everything she's known and was comfortable with, and she has to seek a safe place where she can live. So this idea about seeking safety, a perceived safe place, a place where she will have legal protections, even as she exists without a legal status, she will be in a safer place than her home, which was, as we can see, it was run by gangs, and they've already committed horrible violence on her family and on her. And think about also, as we learned about her trip up, think about the dangers, her fears, but also in this book, that emphasis on the small elements of human kindness, against human predators. So, see in the group that she was in, even though we don't have an unpacking of her fellow travelers, we see that emphasis on the way that the people around her, they, in their fear as they were traveling north, they formed that family, they protect each other, they looked out for Evelyn, they looked out for the other woman who had the baby. And we see that element of, even in these dark moments in this book, there is that emphasis on humanity and on shared human kindness. And that's a very important theme in this book. So coming back to the present, there are a lot of things that continue to be unfolded. So we've learned a lot about Evelyn's employers, those who she was working for, obviously illegally. So Frank and Cheryl Leroy. So, and we see she was taking care of their child, Frank, who has, Frankie Jr., who has cerebral palsy, and the extent to which she was taking. And we saw also that, Richard and Lucia are hearing about this, and they're kind of computing in their heads, oh, she's not paid enough, they're taking advantage of her. From Evelyn's point of view, was it being taken advantage of, or again, that idea of a safe harbor, somewhere where she felt protected, somewhere where she felt like she could, essentially live, and also that interesting revelation of what's in the Lexus. Well, there is a body in the back of this Lexus. And this is the source of Evelyn's great fear that drove her to the point that she just essentially went to Richard's house and just, kind of just threw himself on her mercy, almost, because there is a body in the back of the Lexus. And this is Catherine Brown, Frankie Jr.'s physical therapist. So in that moment when there is a body, how do Richard and Lucia each react when this body is revealed? And you can see on page 114, this amazing, moment of, so there's Lucia, and she's saying, come on, Evelyn, what are you so afraid of? Added Lucia. Then, stumbling over the words and trembling severely, the young girl told them that there was a dead body in the car trunk. She had to repeat it twice for Lucia to understand. It took Richard even longer. So there's, that revelation of, how did it get there? Asked Richard, still incredulous. I don't know. Did you run over the person? No. Faced with the possibility that they really were dealing with an anonymous dead person, Richard started scratching with both hands at the hives that broke out on his arms and chest in moments of tension. A man of unchanging habits and routines, he was ill prepared for unforeseen events like this. Although he was not yet aware of it, his stable, cautious existence had come to the end. And here's Richard's first reaction, that his first reaction is, okay, we have to call the police. He's like, okay, this is the point where we really have to call the police. The young Guatemalan girl gave a shriek of terror and began weeping with heartrending sobs for reasons that were evident to Lucia, but not to Richard, even though he was well aware of the constant state of uncertainty most Latin American immigrants lived in. I suppose you're undocumented, said Lucia. We can't call the police, Richard. We would be getting this poor girl into trouble. She took the car without permission. She could be accused of theft as well as homicide. You know how the police treat undocumented immigrants. They always go for the weakest link in the chain. So there's that moment of Richard's first reaction is, okay, now we really have to get the police involved. But for Lucia, she understands where the fear is coming from. She's saying, no, Richard, we can't do that. Put a hold on it. You can see that here's Lucia is at all points, she's putting the primary emphasis on what do we need to do to protect Evelyn in this situation. And Richard kind of lags behind her, but you can also see how he kind of gets with that program to a large degree. He understands. We have that kind of immediate certainty and conviction from Lucia. And then for Richard, there's fear and vacillation, but ultimately support. And we can see on, that element of what is really driving each of them, that they get kind of the information of what was going on. And then, on 116, we see, that here's Lucia saying she needs help. When Richard's saying, what do we even know about this girl? And Lucia says that she needs help. And there's a sepulchral silence. Richard went on scratching, thinking of what a tremendous mess he was in. The police, an investigation, the press, his reputation down the drain. And his father's voice deep inside him, reminding him of his duty to help the persecuted. I wouldn't be in this world, and you wouldn't have been born if some brave souls hadn't hidden me from the Nazis, he had told him over and over about 1,000,000 times. So there's, that element of this is what is very fundamentally driving Richard. We've seen through these flashbacks what drives Lucia in this sense of protection and of justice. This idea of justice beyond law, which is a very interesting theme, and it's going to be repeated many times. For Richard, though, he has to be reminded of it, but once he is, he's weighing all these things that he values, the safety of his world, the things that he's built so much. And then also this other idea that, those who protected his father against the Nazis were breaking the law, were acting in an extrajudicial sense, but they were following an idea of the law of humanity, of justice, of a law that was illegal, but the law that was to protect others, even when that itself was against the law. So this idea of natural justice is a concept that's going to come up several times in this book, and is an interesting one. It's going to be useful for our essay as we go forward. But we continue then forward. Then there's Lucia basically saying, okay, we've got to find out if this person is alive. We've got to go through this. And, so she's just immediately just taking action, getting ready to go. And there's Richard saying, oh, okay, all right, I've got to help you here, Lucia. He says, you can't go on your own. I'll have to go with you. We'll need to defrost the trunk to open it. So we see that there's Lucia running ahead, and there's kind of Richard behind her, like, okay, let's get the practical things done here then. So we see these elements. And on 123, we also see that element that really is critical for Lucia, that, even though on 122, that's, let's get, Lucia has a plan. She's like, okay, we're going to dump this car. We're going to dump the body in it. Richard's mind is like, what? That would make us accomplices. And she says, we already are, but if we do things properly, no one will know. They can't connect us to any of us, not even to Evelyn. The snow is a blessing. So we see that element of her practicality and her complete commitment to protecting Evelyn. So on 123, that decision that, okay, here's where we'll go, here's what we'll do. When he's kind of establishing to her, no, we can't just go to Canada with this. That's not going to fix it. There's Lucia. By the way, we need to identify the victim. We can't abandon her somewhere without at least knowing who she is. Why? Asked a perplexed Richard. Out of respect. We're going to have to take another look in the trunk, and it's better to do so now before there are people out and about. So they take Evelyn with them. But there's, Lucia, and that, here she is, and she's been completely on the, plan of, we're going to ditch this car, we're going to ditch this body. But then we have that, element of she's looking out for Evelyn, but at the same time, there's that out of respect. We have to identify this person. Maybe we'll take a photo, maybe we'll do this, but the person needs to be identified. Ultimately, the family has to know what happened. And what does this tie back to? This ties back to what she and her mother suffered in, the not knowing about what happened to Enrique, and what she saw so many other families suffer, when she was doing her book about the disappeared in Chile. So we see in a large way, here's what's driving them. And there we have, they get Evelyn out to the car, and of course it's, Miss Catherine, and we have all these elements that are going in. Yes. So, and we also have a lot of the things that we see that Evelyn has absorbed that she doesn't like to talk about. And so those are a lot of the elements that are covered in 82 to 176. Going into the last portion of this book, you're going to see the final revelations of the past that impact the present, primarily from what drives Richard? Where does he going? And those last pieces of information about Evelyn and her life and Lucia, but a lot of that last portion is going to be telling us about what formed Richard into the person he is today. And also, as you can see, we have a problem. We have a body in a trunk that we have people trying to find a place to put it so that they can protect Evelyn. So we're going to continue with our very interesting road trip. And we're also going to continue with the revelations of the past. And again, going into that last portion, very much keep an eye on this idea of what is natural justice. All right, so though that is the second portion of the Isabel Allende book, In the Midst of Winter. And very important, you're going to read from 177 right through the end of the book. And once you complete the book, you're going to start looking at the assignment for the essay on this. So we are all set. I will interact with you in our next recording. Thank you.